primarily I'm interested in Richard, your father, and some things more on a personal basis here. And but there are some things that historically, some instances I want to ask you about. See if you remember him talking about some of these things. And I got a list here, and I'm just going to go down the line. One thing, and I may have asked you this before, but maybe in the meantime you thought of it, but anywhere along the line, do you remember either of your parents talking about their wedding in any way? I mean, when you had your wedding, did your mother ever reminisce about hers, or did they ever talk about that in any aspect of their wedding in Minnesota?
Have you got that on now?
Yeah.
I really can't.
There was nothing? Did she ever talk about, I don't know, the dress she wore, or I know we got the picture in that, but did she ever talk about who made the dress, or who conducted the ceremony, or who came to the wedding, or when it was during the day?
Aunt Maria was her attendant.
And Aunt Lena made her dress.
Yes.
Aunt Lena made her wedding dress.
Did Lena make that dress just as a wedding dress?
That's right.
And it wasn't used for anything else after that?
No.
Except for a wedding dress?
That's right.
Wasn't that a little unusual, though? I mean, didn't they usually have a wedding dress that then just turned into a dress?
They wore that just for the wedding, and then they put it away.
And did she put her dress away?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what happened to that dress?
I don't think she brought it here. I don't, because she always mentioned it. Too bad that I didn't bring my wedding dress along. She left it in Minnesota or wherever. I don't know. She had a veil.
Her wedding dress was dark blue.
White veil.
Mm-hmm.
Dark
and a
blue?
white and dark blue.
How do you know it was dark blue?
She said so.
They got married in the old North African church before the one that's there now.
I understand.
Did they, do you know who the best man was? Did they ever say that?
It's a shame a person doesn't know that.
Can you guess at who the best man might have been? Would it have been a brother?
I'll bet you it would be Uncle William, huh?
I would think so. I would think so. And I know Aunt Marie was there. She was with something about Marie.
Did they talk? Let's see. Did they ever say anything about a celebration or anything after the wedding? Did they ever come up on
Yeah.
Yeah, they talked about a couple of days even they were celebrating. I don't know what the celebration consisted of. But
they were dancing, I know.
They danced
and they ate all night long and drank all night long.
They partied for 2 days. Usually. I remember Dad saying that.
Did he say where they partied? Did they say anything about his father and the partying? His father was noted to have taste for the liquor.
They didn't, especially about him, I don't recall. I know that Grandpa liked his drinks, but I don't know of this incident. I can't say that.
Did they say anything about a chivalry? Ever?
All I know, they partied and they ate and they drank. That's all I know.
And danced.
Mm-hmm, danced.
Danced all night.
Danced all night long.
Did they when they told you this, did they give you the impression that the bride and the groom stayed there all that time?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
They stayed there all the way through their wedding night?
That's right.
Nobody thought of going home that night.
And the bride and the groom didn't either. They stayed right there.
That's interesting. Did Richard ever say anything about whether they farmed in Minnesota before he came out here?
Oh,
The assumption is that they were.
Oh, yeah, they did
somewhere.
farm.
Did he ever say anything about that farm? Do you remember?
All I know, Dad told me one time that in a way he was sorry that he moved to North Dakota. He wished that he'd have stayed in Minnesota. But didn't he farm on that place where Dwayne Schultz by the lake, by Brooks Lake there, Blocks Lake? Wasn't that Dad's first farm?
Somewhere in that area, but you know, he sold, Uncle Emil got married then, and he left Emil farm that land when he left.
So, the farm that Emil farmed on in Minnesota was Richard's?
That's the way I understand it.
And then what do you think happened to that farm? He sell it?
He sold it, I think, when he came.
And that's how he
You
got
mean
it?
Emil did? Yeah, Emil sold the farm.
No, wait, now you... Okay, when you say that he let Emil farm that place, are you saying that he sold that farm to Emil?
I understand that he was supposed to pay for that land. Whether it ever got paid, I don't know. I've heard remarks in that.
Hmm.
So.
I've talked to both of you about the old original place out here where he built the house and all that sort of thing. As time went on and you were off of that place and any time past when they moved it, did your parents ever recount specific instances that happened on that farm? Did they ever recount what life was like on those first 5 years on that farm?
On the homestead?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they talked about that a lot.
What sorts of things did they just talk about?
Because that land was solid rock, and there was a lot of work to get that so they could make a living on it. That was a homestead, you know. He didn't buy that. It was you homestead, you farmed it so long, and then the land was yours. Of course, then Henry Rapp came and Willie came too, you know. Antoline and Klaus even came out.
Mm-hmm.
But they kept working the land, and I know the remark was made many times. Our mother would sit on the plow and put Johnny and Vi on the end of the row, and she would plow and come back in the row. Okay, she'd make another round. That kind of life that was, if that's what you were meant.
Mm-hmm. When they came out here, then there was nothing there. Is that what you're saying? There was nothing there?
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing, there were no buildings on that place? There wasn't a fence
It was
inside?
just marked out. The land was surveyed, and maybe I should say, so that he knew when he left Dogden with his horses and his stuff. It was marked so he knew what land was to be his.
Are you saying then that he built the house and he built the barn?
He built everything.
He built everything on there?
It's the understanding I had. There was nothing there but prairie and rocks.
Mm-hmm. Did they fence in those days?
Even with stones. I believe it.
They made stone fences?
Oh, yeah.
Do you see those around anymore?
I suppose certain areas would have them. I don't know.
And then he,
Did he use a stone fence?
They used that way.
Then for the barn on top, for the ceiling, you know, the top of it was made out of flax straw.
Now they put poles, old trees, and then put the straw across the top.
And they banked the house with flax straw to keep it warm in the wintertime.
What do you mean banked?
Put flax straw against the house so it would stay warmer.
And then
You mean
later
at the
on,
base of the foundation?
Mm-hmm.
and then later on they used manure from the barn for that.
And
That
then
would seal it.
How high up would they bank it?
Oh, perimeter there. They had little windows. You know how low windows they were. 2 feet high, maybe.
and then my mother would go out in the pasture and pick what they call cow
Chips
yeah, and that's what she would burn in the house.
for heat, for cooking. That's
So
cool.
there was no wood around, was there? I mean, there were no trees when they came out here.
Everything bare.
Did they ever talk about what? I mean, do you have any idea what they thought about when he got off the train, or your mother got off the train and got on the wagon and got out to this is the place? I mean, what do you think went through their minds? There must not have been a tree in sight or a road to speak of. Or?
See, they didn't come together, you know.
I
You knew
understood
that.
that.
And Dad wouldn't come from with his horses. They told him his horses were sick. Okay.
That bug.
He was, oh my gosh, cricket. He, well, of course,
There you go.
it was, I don't know what to say. It surely was.
It was pretty desolate, wasn't it? Out
Yeah, I
here?
was going to say it looked very bleak. I remember him saying when they told him that his horses were all sick, he was pretty sick too. And he thought that they were all contaminated. He had to, he wouldn't dare let him take his horses out. But he loaded them in the night before daylight and went. I'm sure it wasn't a rosy picture. I don't know. And then Mother came later, you knew that.
The house was already built when your mother came then, wasn't it?
They had started to build because there's the babies to come too.
So, but it wasn't necessarily finished. Were the 4 walls up, do you think, and the roof?
Oh yeah, that I think, but not the inside walls. They weren't completed. They lived that way for a couple of years, I think, before. I hear Dad, talk about it. Before and then they used that old plaster over the logs. A lot of stone. And they used a lot of stone.
Was that house built with lumber they got from town? I mean, you say logs, do you mean, it wasn't a log house though, was it?
Yeah, but they put plaster in between
yeah.
between the woods.
2 by 4s.
Well, because I don't know where they got trees half sawed, and then they had plastered this up. Whether they used trees, I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, I'm just curious. There certainly aren't many trees up there on top of those buttes.
I know.
And there probably weren't many when they got there either. I mean, I don't.
It was all rocks. There was
There was nothing.
not much. I don't know, just
Birds didn't even know a place to sit.
all I know, I remember him saying that on those 60 miles he hauled stuff out of Butte to get started. Whether he hauled lumber or what, I don't know.
Maybe he brought the beams and bought the beams and things. So.
I wonder where he left his horses when there wasn't a barn there, when he brought his horses. Huh? At first, where in the world did they stay?
Tied them up someplace. I don't know.
Do the wagons.
Oh, I suppose on the
Oh,
wagon.
yeah.
They had the wagon. He brought the wagon with the horses. So, of course, then Uncle Claus and them came out, and then that summer they built or tried to help him get started. So Uncle Henry and Willie too, but they were in the next farm. That had a building on it. but they all kind of worked together.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of them lost.
Right, there were,
courage.
well, Carl Rapp was out there too,
Yeah,
just down the
Carl
road,
Rapp.
and also Herman Hartfield was there. And none of them were successful,
No,
at least here.
they all.
But your father was. I mean, would you say that your father was successful on that farm?
Mm-hmm, I would say
Would
that.
you say so?
Mm-hmm.
When he moved down and he sold that farm to Knifer, he never did get his money for that place.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say he was successful. He stuck it out, and he.
Well, why was he successful and the other 4 or 5 families all they went back to Minnesota or they moved up north?
Uncle Henry always said he had enough of those rocks. And him and Uncle Willie, they got discouraged. That's why they left. And Grandma was still living, she was out here.
Mm-hmm.
And Aunt Lena and Uncle Klaus too, they said.
They said they had
took
enough
their
of
buggy and they went.
Yeah, they said they had enough of rocks. They weren't going to dig anymore.
Well,
They didn't, the Rapps never did stick to anything, to any particular job or anything. They weren't the type. They'd go for a while and then they'd go.
well, I can see why they didn't. In that case, they got discouraged and then they left. But I'm still not sure why he succeeded. I understand why they didn't succeed, but why did he succeed? I mean, was
determination. Well, he was determined to make it.
And he
but
didn't.
He could have gone back.
Yeah, but he didn't want to go back to Minnesota. He liked it here.
And yet you said that he later said that he felt sometimes he had made a mistake coming here.
Yeah, well, he said he made a mistake in coming here because he thought that Ma would have liked it better, would have been better off for Ma down there.
Was your mother resigned to the situation here, or did she like it here, or would she have rather not been here?
She never really was discouraged in coming. Her family and that, she worked.
Would she have preferred to stay back in Minnesota, you think?
I don't know.
But when we got older, though, Ma always said that she was glad that she didn't stay in Minnesota.
Yeah, she used to make those remarks.
Mm-hmm.
Did she ever say why she was glad?
Mm-hmm.
Especially,
sorry, go ahead.
Especially after they moved down here on the roosting place. Mother was
Here she was
much
happy.
contented.
Yeah.
All of the 3 places they lived, is that place the one that they found most satisfactory? They lived at the old place and they moved up where Walter was and then they moved down.
Of course, when they moved to Walter's place, then she really thought they had running water in the bathrooms where they
And electric lights.
But as far as friendships, I'm talking about the community at large. She really, all the pastors came. I don't care who came there; they were there, and that part, I think that she was satisfied with.
Yeah, she was happy.
How did they clear the land up there? You said it was full of rocks. So you mean by rocks, you mean big rocks, or you mean lots of
every kind
baseball-sized rocks, or what?
Rocks.
Big rocks and small rocks and everything. And Dad
couldn't even lift.
No, and Dad did all of that digging by hand, didn't he?
They had a little plow. They used the horses, plowed it, and then picked rocks.
Little by little, they cleared the land.
What did they do for, if they came out, and indeed it wasn't cleared at all?
No one had farmed it.
then how long was it before they could farm and raise any sort of crop? Or would they try to do that right over the rocks initially and then clear out later?
No, they had to,
They had to
go
clear.
over every acre of land before they could seed it.
But that must have taken a long time.
Well, I can't say just how long.
Yeah, it was
But
all
I
done.
know they cropped he's planted though, it wasn't too long and they were going. But I don't know what to say.
Now you see other people, he came out before the others did.
Mm-hmm. Mother and Dad were out here when the rest came. They came in the
They
next
came
year.
after, yeah.
So he was out here a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to imagine one man out there, or even if your mother helped, one man out there trying to clear rocky ground. I mean, how much could you expect to get done in?
Not much, but they did. And then they had neighbors too, those Bowers, and they were starting, and they helped one another too. I remember Dad saying that.
Well, that's just like in Minnesota. Well, I remember Dad talking about when they dug the trees out to put in crops. They couldn't. They didn't have any like clear land.
Mm-hmm.
They had to dig all the trees out little by little.
Did he?
Mm-hmm.
Did he ever mention what time of the year he came out here?
In the spring, I think.
In the spring of the year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm still having a hard time getting this straight. If he came out in the spring of the year, and he had to clear the land, when did they plant the crops?
Well, I presume the very first year there wasn't much cropping done.
Mm-hmm.
He had to clear the land first.
Well, did he come out with money in his pocket and that he could buy supplies, and he didn't have, if he couldn't raise anything for cash, what
He didn't
what
have
did they
very
live
much
on?
money, I know that. Oh,
But they did raise a garden.
yeah, they all.
You know.
The reason I know they didn't have very much money is because when Willie died, he went to the banker at Butte and he borrowed $16 to bury him, to buy the coffin. And I remember him saying, so I know that they didn't.
$16, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
He borrowed $50, and then the coffin cost $16.
Something like that. I know the 16 was involved there or something.
16 is the coffin.
So,
Gee, that was sure hard for them, wasn't it?
and then Johnny was.
And then Johnny was sick at the time.
It doesn't sound like a very pleasurable experience for either
No.
your mother or your
sure.
father out there.
We sure worked hard. That's what we heard many times to get where we were, to get where we are.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Dad was a hard worker. So was Mother.
Just out of curiosity, again here.
They milked cows, though, a couple.
they brought a couple cows
Oh,
along
did
with the
they?
horses.
Mm-hmm.
They had
They
a couple cows.
Mm-hmm. Because I know that when I was born, and I was sickly, because Mother's milk was no good. And then Aunt Lena said, give her some cow's milk and see. And then I
He brought
started
a couple
gaining.
cows along.
Yeah, he brought a couple cows along.
They had for transportation. There was a wagon and a horses team. We went away to Butte.
Just kind of in passing here, it was something I think I meant to ask before the last year when I talked to you, but I never did. How did of course we're talking about different periods because there's a difference in your age here, but back as early as you can remember, How did the day end? I'm not talking about harvest time, but I'm talking about a typical non-harvest time.
Today?
I mean, um, when evening came, I mean, I guess he had some cows there to milk and things like that. When your father came into the house, then what? I mean, was it late in the evening when he finally called it a day as far as working, or did they come in and spend time? The family spend time together, or did
Well,
or
you're
what?
talking from when they were there, or
From any time, from as early as you can remember, or later. I mean, any sort of.
Well, I think after their evening meal, I can remember them sitting and talking about the things of the day, discussing. They just didn't end up and go, you know what I mean? There was a family, I think.
My dad did a lot of reading.
Yeah.
German paper. Staatsanzeiger or something like that.
Mother wasn't a reader.
No, but Dad read a lot.
And they would discuss things. I would say that they had, you know.
What sorts of things did they discuss besides the activities of the day? Do you remember as a kid listening to them talk?
Oh, what did you say?
Don't know.
Church, politics, neighbors, relatives, the weather, all of those. Well, that's okay.
I know they talked about what they said. I can't.
Did you get in on these conversations, or was it just simply between your parents?
No, I think
We were all in
it was
on
a
it.
family affair.
Yeah.
Well, I really think it was a close family, you know.
Mm-hmm. Close knit.
Did the routines of the evening change with the seasons? Was it different during the summer, say, than during the winter? And if so,
You know,
how was it different?
but you know, when it was harvesting and seeding and so forth, or haying, Dad never, he'd eat his supper first. She'd make supper. Then he'd go out and he'd work till dark. He couldn't see no more.
Dad was when he was thrashing, and that was he'd fix on the rig until 4 o'clock in the morning. A lot of times when you come in, he'd lay under the rig, spend the night
And
right
sleep,
there.
yeah, there, right by the machine.
So that would only be
But
through the
then
harvest season.
yeah, but he didn't do that out there. He did that here.
Oh, he had a rig though out there before he came, because that fellow bought the rig too, and he never got anything out
Oh,
of
that
it.
place.
At any time on the first farm, at any time did he ever have a hired man? You said he had relatives that would come out and they kind of shared.
Neighbors would share, but
Yeah.
I can't really recall.
No.
Neighbors would help one another. Different than nowadays.
Had the hired men he had here.
Here?
Yeah,
About here and
Roosing's.
Roosing, but not
Yeah,
what about on
at Roosing's place.
the Schmidt place up there? What about that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Herman was there too.
Yeah, Herman was there too.
What did Richard? I mean, what was Richard's view on a hired man? I mean, how did he see the role of the hired man?
Well,
Were there? Did he think there were? I mean, it was important role on his farm, the hired man.
the hired man he had there was the one that fell down the hay barn and got killed.
August Hilger.
Hilger. He took him in just because August didn't have a place to live.
He was mentally retarded, kind
He
of.
was
Slow learner.
Now, is
So
this the
Dad
one that was,
kept him.
was that the one from Minnesota?
Yeah,
That you
that's
put
the
on the
one that
trailer?
Dad took along and put in the
Okay.
freight car where the horses were.
And then that's another thing I meant to ask, is when did he bring him out?
The same time when he moved his horses and his 2 cows down
But yet
here.
you said that he didn't have any hired men on that old place.
Yeah, but he went for himself. Dad got an old house or something, and he stayed in an old house.
No, but I mean, you said, oh, I see. But I thought that he worked for your father up
Did
until
when
the
he
time.
come down here.
Yeah,
But when your father
He
brought
made his
him,
home with us down here. But I don't know just how.
well, where was he before that time?
he was with, he lived in an old shack.
But I
That's
don't know if
all
he
I
was-
know, but I don't know if he worked for Dad or not. I don't think so.
And Dad, you think that your father brought him out here and
Because I know Ma used to give him, he used to come down to the house and Ma would, had potatoes and she dug potatoes for him and gave him potatoes to take along
And
so he has something to eat.
just to make sure I get this straight, you're saying that Richard brought him along initially when he brought his
That's right.
livestock from Minnesota.
Yeah, he
Mhm.
was.
But he didn't hire a hired man
Mm-mm.
until he got onto the Schmidt place. So that would have been about 6 years
No,
had passed.
he hired a man on the Roosing's place. When he came from there to when 15, that Dad moved from there, and he went on to Roosing's place, that's where he got his hired a man, because he had too much.
Oh, okay.
See, August was out, then he followed Dad, and Dad hired him.
Yeah, then yeah.
What did he do in the meantime, this August?
I guess he helped out wherever he could,
Wherever he
the
could.
He was
neighbors.
just,
Yeah.
Kind of living.
he didn't have a home or
Yeah.
nothing, he just,
I just curious. Back to the idea of a hired man.
he's buried here too.
Hmm?
He's buried here in the cemetery.
Yeah, he's buried here.
Did Richard ever say, or did he? What was he looking for in a hired man? He was looking for
Quality.
strong back, or honesty, or somebody who was careful and conscientious, or did he? Do you?
Trustworthy. He wants somebody he could trust. He always said, that. If
Dependent.
I can't trust him, I don't want him around. I can hear Dad say that. Even with his crew on the machine, if I can't trust him, I don't want him around. And August was one that he could trust.
So was Herman Buzak.
Your father never had really, I'm talking about permanent hired men, he didn't have a large number of permanent hired men, did he? I mean, he seemed to have, like, this August, and then there was
Herman.
one after the other, but never two at the same time, from the way it sounds.
No, only time when he ran his crew.
Mhm.
That's
Other
the
than
only
fresh.
time.
Yeah.
Did he have, okay, and then obviously there was Hank worked for him too.
Oh, yeah, when he,
But that was
was
later.
with the crew too.
That was
See,
with the
they
crew.
came,
Well, tell me, besides August then and this Herman Buzak, did he have any other permanently year-round hired men?
Well, he had Henry Toon 1 year, and he had Henry Kobernick 1 year.
yeah, they worked through the fall season.
Yeah,
But did they have anybody year-round?
Herman Buzak. is-
What about after Buzak left? Did he replace him with a hired man?
No, because Walter was then
He was old enough then to take over. So, really, he only had 2 permanent hired men, year-round hired men, and then occasionally a relative would work for a year or for a season.
Mhm.
I see. Okay. Did your parents become particularly attached to their hired men?
Oh, yeah.
Herman Buzak,
Very
he was
close.
really close to Herman.
Mhm.
Of course, Herman was real good too. And Dad was real good to Herman. Well, Dad was good to all his men. If they produced the goods.
Mhm. Yeah.
But Dad expected them to work though. You know.
He was a demanding boss. Huh?
That's right.
Was he reasonable?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Do you know whether in the, I'm not talking about hired men now, but just people in general, were there certain qualities that your father disliked in a person?
Dishonest.
I mean, would he say, gee, I just can't stand that and such person? And why would he say something like that?
He used to say that too, but why?
What didn't he like about people that he disliked?
There's one fellow down here that every other thing he said was a fable, wasn't true. I remember him saying that, oh, can't stand that Henry Beatty. And then his wife would swear it. Yeah, that's so, and it was so untrue, and Dad knew it. Always, I just can't take that. That's what I can remember about him, that party.
Do you remember your father ever arguing with a non-family member?
Dad used to tell him what he thought, but I can't just specific.
Their dad was very outspoken,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And but people liked him for that.
Mm-hmm. He was everybody's friend.
He was everybody's friend, but he told them just what he thought.
Mm-hmm. Tell it like it is.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say any specific.
And he was my dad was honest. If he owed a person 2 pennies, he'd get it. Very honest man.
Would you say that he was
You could
also generous?
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
He was very kind-hearted.
Can you give me examples of that?
Well, when Uncle Emil lived here, he let him use his horses. He gave him seed to put in the ground. He tried to help him out, and then same with the neighbors. If they wanted any help, he would give them help right away.
Uncle Emil had that big family, they hardly anything to eat, and he told them, go right in the basement. If we aren't home, we've got potatoes. And
the same when Carl Schmidt's wife died, he helped Carl Schmidt, you know, helped him even put in his grain and everything. And then the farmers would come over, and Dad would sharpen their plowshares for them, you know, fix their horseshoes on the horses. He always helped them. He'd go out in the wintertime and he'd help butcher pigs, beef. He'd help make sausage and everything.
Did either of your parents, probably your father more than anyone, get angry much?
He had a temper.
When he meant business.
What sort of things did he get angry about? I mean, what sort of, what topic could set him off?
Politics.
Politics?
Well, he used to argue politics.
Yeah, that's
Who did you argue politics with? I mean, just
neighbors.
Yeah, it was through the wartime there, boy.
And that's when the nonpartisan business was being organized.
and that's when he became
was
involved
very
with that.
That's when he got,
Yeah.
when Townley was running,
Langer.
Fraser, Langer.
Would he, is that true at all of your mother as well?
No, my mother was
She was
quiet.
soft-spoken.
She never argued?
No.
Would your father ever argue with your mother?
Oh, yes. They would argue.
Would they?
Mhm.
Takes two to argue, they say.
That's right.
Can't argue by yourself.
So your mother must not have been
But she was,
completely.
She was so soft-hearted.
yeah, and kind, you know, she didn't want to hurt nobody's feelings.
Do you remember instances when your father and mother disagreed over something?
The only time I can remember when Dad was going to buy that farm,
Which farm was that?
Schmidt.
Schmidt Farms, and that sounded like an awful lot of money at that time. And Mother was very opposed. She says, we aren't going to make it. We have to go, we'll go right back. They were just getting so they were moving. I can remember that.
And they were making money where they were. You know, they had
Things
good
were going
crops.
good
and
for
good.
them, yeah.
Mhm.
What happened when your parents disagreed?
Dad won out.
Usually, I guess.
Mhm.
Oh, forget it, Mom said, forget it. What she do?
Would your father let disagreements, not with your mother, but arguments or disagreements with non-family members get in the way of his friendships? Did he bear grudges at all?
I don't think so. He'd say his piece and that was it. Yeah. Next time he'd meet this guy.
Start all over again then?
Everything's fine.
Fresh. How did your mother react when she was angry?
She got angry fast, I think, but she was over it right now. I mean,
But when she was angry, how did she act?
Well, she never would say very much. She wasn't like me. I'd talk for an hour afterwards by myself.
I said she was quiet and she'd just go about her
way, yeah.
But you could tell she was angry?
Yeah, you could tell the stress or whatever you call it.
She always was quiet. She never would say very much.
Your mother never smiled in pictures at all. I've never found, except her wedding picture, she has a slight smile. I've never seen a picture of her smiling.
No, I guess that's right.
You think that really true? I mean, is that statement really reflect how she really was? Did she ever smile?
She did, though.
She was so kind, though.
Yeah, she did smile a
she
lot,
wouldn't
though.
hurt her soul if she could walk. I mean, she wasn't...
I think that's just taking a picture, but herself, she wasn't like that. She would laugh and smile a lot.
I would think, too.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see her being any other way. She was just trying to pose and couldn't, I guess.
But even later on, even as she got much older, I mean, right down to her 50th anniversary picture.
Yeah,
still was never a smile
smile
on a picture.
No, that's right.
It's funny. It's rather deceiving, you know. That,
It is, because she wasn't that way.
No, she wasn't. No matter who she'd meet there, she just smiled for everybody.
Well, I'll tell you,
Okay.
Margaret, Mrs. Schwanke told me not so long ago, she said, the only one, she said, that was really good to us and was, when my mother died, she says, was your mother. She said she always took us in and fed us, gave us our meals whenever we'd come over there, she said, and she was always kind and always had a smile for us. Mrs. Schwanke just told me that here a couple of weeks ago yet. We talked about Mother. She says in the whole neighborhood, she said, Mother, she says, your mother was really good to us. She says, and I will never forget that, she said.
Was your mother particularly sentimental? I mean, could she become, I mean, did she ever shed a tear over sentimental causes?
Oh, I think she was soft-hearted.
Yeah. I've seen her cry.
I too, many times.
What sort of things would cause her to cry that you can remember?
For one thing, when Dad used to talk real hard, you know, Dad would get flying hot and mad, you know. You know how Dad was. He had a hot temper.
She wouldn't say anything.
No, but she would shed tears.
Was your
sometimes.
father sentimental in any way?
I don't think so.
I don't know, he's good-hearted though.
Yeah, he was awful good-hearted.
Were your parents particularly affectionate towards each other?
Oh yeah, I think so.
I mean, did they ever
Oh, yeah.
display their affection within the family scene?
I don't think not as much as...
some, but...
Yeah, but they did. In a way, they did. You know, Dad was always touching her and touching and, oh gosh. He was a beaner.
In their way, I would say.
In their way, yeah.
That was, you're talking about within the family setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about outside of the family setting? Ever put his arm around her in public? I mean, sometimes you see husbands and wives kissing each other in public. Anything like
No,
that?
he didn't do that. They didn't do that.
Did they do that in the family?
Not as much as some either.
Mm-mm.
They weren't, you know.
They were too sophisticated.
Yeah. Okay. Was there somebody that Richard really admired? I don't mean necessarily someone living right here, a neighbor. I mean just anyone, whether it's a historical figure or somebody in the community or another relative, somebody that he really thought, really admired for some reason.
Senator Langer.
No kidding, he did.
Oh boy, he thought there was nobody like Senator Langer.
And that was because why?
Because of what he did for the farmers. That was the man. And he went to Bismarck and made special trips
Dad
to
did.
hear Langer. Boy, Langer was all it.
He went to hear Langer speak?
Oh, yes.
Many times.
Did he ever take either of you with him?
Took me.
Really?
Took me to Turtle Lake one time.
Langer was speaking then?
Mm-hmm. I'll never forget that.
He sat in the audience and...
Oh, yes. And then after his speech was over with, he went and shook hands with Langer and they talked and
Get
talked.
that handshake in, I'll tell you.
Mhm.
He liked that.
Mhm.
Was there anyone else that he admired?
Well, I think there were some pastors we had that Dad
Oh,
was very
yes,
close
very
to.
close to.
They'd
Now-
always come and live there at our house too.
Mm-hmm. Stayed overnight.
Reverend Betts was one of them.
Reverend Grum was another one.
What was the last one?
Grum.
Groom?
He's the one that organized this church. and he thought a lot of Bepler.
Oh, yeah.
Dad and Mother were very close to all of our pastors,
They'd always come and stay there.
and they always came for meals at our place. Stayed.
Even Reverend Beaver, when he wasn't
Oh,
married yet, he was there all the time. He was treasurer too for how many years?
40, wasn't it?
I don't remember, but it was a long time.
Yeah. What about your mother? Was there anyone that she admired?
Lisa, she did like the pastors too. They all got along. She got along very good with the Pastor Betts would come out and peel potatoes for her and help her get the meals and everything.
Was there anyone in particular who you may remember her telling you to you should follow them as an example?
You? I know my mother was very close to her sister Emma.
Emma.
Yeah, they were close.
Very close.
Closer than Marie.
Oh, yes. And she was very close to her brother Henry.
Yeah.
Because Henry ate meals at our place all the time too. She washed all his creamery business.
Was Richard? Is it fair? Would it be a fair statement to say that Richard was quite a proud man?
Oh yes.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody seemed to, in the neighborhood, they all looked up to him. That's right.
When you say about proud, this maybe doesn't enter into this, but those days, even in clothing, you know, he would dress. It was hard times, you know, but he would always, that was one of the first things.
And he was the best dressed man all the time.
Usually.
He put an importance on appearance.
That's right.
Physical appearance.
Very important.
And he was like that until the day he died.
What sorts of are there specific things in his life you know that he was very proud to have accomplished? Certainly making it on that first farm where everyone else had failed would be something that maybe fall into that category. Were there other things?
His cattle. He was very proud of his Aberdeen Angus cattle.
He used to take them to St. Paul himself.
Every fall, and he'd take a carload down.
Another thing, running a thrashing crew.
Oh yeah.
He had very many compliments of how he could handle a crew, and he was proud of that. People come and what a good job he did with his threshing.
And the same with thrashing the grain. They were all satisfied with the way he.
That's what I said.
And he got along good with the men too. All those men that he worked with, pretty good. He would get more jobs with the thrashing machine than the next fellow with the thrashing machine. Then he'd come home and he'd laugh. He'd say, well, I got that job.
He was a good thrasher. I talk about him today, yeah.
Really?
You see some real old people, and I remember your dad and what a good thrasher he was. So it must have been so.
He was highly respected in the community.
Sounds like it. Would you say that your father was an opinionated man? Strong opinions?
I think so.
Yeah, he had ideas of his own. It was his opinion.
He had a good business head on him.
Outside of politics, were there things that he was particularly opinionated on?
He was a very religious man, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, that one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask you something. Did your father ever express his opinions on different groups of people? Let's say, what did your father think of Jews?
We used to talk about it.
Yeah, I remember a Jew coming one time to our place selling material.
Just hang on, just a second. I asked you, what did he think of Jews?
He always had it in for the Jews. I don't know why.
Did he?
Yeah, because the reason that he always had it in for the Jews is because he said they didn't work. He says you never saw a Jew farmer. He said they never worked, he said.
If it wouldn't be for the Jews, we wouldn't be in the shape we're in.
Yeah.
That was one of his
Sayings.
Jews had the money, sort of thing.
That's right.
So,
Well, let's see. What did he have any particular feelings about? Let's try another group of people. How about the Russians? Now you had a lot of Russians in this area down in Butte and all that sort of thing. Did he?
he had problems with some of the Russians. You couldn't trust him. Especially with their livestock. I'll never forget. At night they'd leave the livestock out and get somebody's wheat field so they could fill up good.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And then one time he got a hold of these horses. This incident, I'll just tell you, it may mean nothing, but
Yeah, that's right.
got on the roost and played. They woke up and heard the horses were on the yard, so they chased him in the fence to hold him in the yard. Herman Buzak was there, and he says, "We'll fix them horses," and he tied tin cans on their tails, opened the barn door, and them horses went. See, those cans hit their heels. I tell you, they ran home with their tin cans. That was really,
They never
really
came back.
Yeah, that really solved the problem. So I thought that was always
They didn't get
cute.
loose anymore. Huh?
No, that was cute.
But there was one neighbor that cut the fence, Pod's fence,
Okay. that I remember.
so the cattle would get out.
Yeah, they had no respect to the Russians. They were
Mm-hmm.
different people. And Dad always says you can't trust them. So.
What was your father's attitude toward bankers?
Well, Krebs, the banker here, he thought a lot of
Not
him.
a particular. Well,
Oh.
there are specifics, fine, but in general, I mean, some people are rather cynical about bankers, particularly during the period of time that your father lived.
Of course, Dad, mostly all the while he was farming, he dealt with this one man,
Yeah.
and they were close friends,
Mhm.
and everything went real well. So I can't
So
say.
he didn't have a low opinion of bankers in general.
No.
How about politicians? I know he was interested in politicians.
Oh, yeah.
Did he have a high opinion in general of
Mhm.
politicians?
He did have.
He did.
He followed the politics, elections, and
Oh,
he was
yes.
very interested.
He didn't question the integrity of the average politician or the honesty. Okay.
I can't.
All right. Did either your father or your mother ever make a decision that that in later times they regretted?
For instance, what?
I don't know. I suppose the first one would have, the big one would have been moving out to North Dakota. Well, they didn't seem to regret that. But were there other decisions that they made when that in later years they thought they perhaps made a mistake? If they had to do it over again, they'd do differently?
The only thing Dad always said that he should have made a decision was when this farm crisis was, he could have bought more land. And Mother was always afraid to go out and invest. She said, we've got it paid. And Dad often said, if only I would have stepped out.
By the farm crisis, you mean during the Depression era?
30s and in there.
Mm-hmm. Because you could buy land for taxes.
He didn't do that, but he wanted to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he bought this paper place that were home place. He did that through the Bank of North Dakota through these times, and he could have done it to more farms, and he was sorry he hadn't.
But Mother was against it all the
Mother
time.
was afraid to invest anymore. He always.
And that was an instance then when he gave in to her then on a major decision like that. She must have been very adamant on that then, because I mean, considering how strong his feelings were on most things.
She was just scared to death to step out. I don't know.
What about your mother? Did she ever? Did you ever talk to her and she said, "Well, if I could do this over again, I'd sure like to change what I did"? Did she have any regrets?
She was pretty contented, wasn't she?
Yeah, I can't say.
With everything.
I can't say. She didn't express her opinion like.
But you know, I was just thinking, I heard her make a remark one time, you know, when Willie died, you know, she made a remark and she said, maybe if we'd have stayed in Minnesota, Willie maybe wouldn't have died. You know, she made that remark.
Yeah.
Speaking of Willie, and did your parents often talk about Willie after he had died? Even later on in life?
Dad often spoke of him. One thing he always said, he was such a smart little boy for his age.
Very smart. He would, how old was he when he died? 2?
He was older than that.
2.5?
3.
Or was he?
3.
I don't remember.
Dad used to always say he took the Sears Roebuck catalog and he knew all, but he would just talk so plain. He knew all everything.
Everything that was in there, he'd name everything that there was in that catalog.
Did Willie's death have much of an impact on your parents?
I don't know. It sure must have been hard.
It was hard on Mother, I know. It was hard on Dad, too.
And think of Johnny in that condition at the same time.
Did your mother ever wish she had more children?
Never heard her say. I think she had enough with us.
No, she didn't. She didn't want any more.
Did you mentioned Johnny and the fact that he was sick at the same time and all that? Of course, then he was retarded as a result of that.
Of the sickness.
What did that mean to the family to have Johnny retarded? I mean, how do you think it changed your parents' lives?
I don't know, but I think they really accepted it, where some parents don't. You know,
Oh yes.
I think, you know, from what we know after.
But really, when I have seen a lot of retarded children, but his retarded business was different too. He wasn't retarded like some of those retarded
Well,
children.
he was really brain damaged.
Yeah, that's right. That's what the doctor in Rochester said, that the gray matter he had such a high temperature that the gray matter burnt.
But the doctor that left the house, came to the house when he was so sick and said, that boy's dying, I might as well go. He was going to catch a train back to Drake.
That was Stone, Dr. Stone.
And he says, this baby will die anyway. So he left the house, and Dad took him. Look at those records.
I know.
Music.
He was sure smart in music. And what the job he did when he cleaned barns was just perfect.
But you say your parents accepted that. They didn't keep him sheltered away from the public or anything like that?
No, they always, wherever they went, Johnny went, then you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would you have considered the happiest times during your parents' lives to them?
What do you mean, the easiest?
No, when you think that they, looking back now, when you think that they were probably just the happiest. There are periods in everybody's life when
they retired and went to Minot.
Yeah, when they moved to Minot, I think. When they retired and no worries anymore. No worries.
Okay.
Another train.
One thing is that that keeps this a fairly recurring theme here is that your father didn't hesitate to use profanity.
No, he didn't.
No, he wasn't bashful in that respect, I'll tell you.
Yeah, he didn't use it in common, ordinary discussions. He sounds like to me.
Just
when he got into something like when Richard said...
He didn't use it through anger, that way. He just, force of habit, I don't know.
But in his common, ordinary conversations with people, he...
Jokingly?
He didn't... Did he use profanity?
No.
When he was talking on the street?
No.
Things like that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Now your father really was quite... Both parents they were quite religious people. They were involved in the church and
Oh, yes. Very much so.
for their whole lives. How did your father reconcile this free and easy use of profanity with his strong interest in the church?
That's a good question.
I told him many times, Dad, don't use God's name in vain. I said...
What was his answer to that?
He said, well, they don't have to listen to me, he said. But he always, and it was always in a joking way.
That's right.
It was never, he never was...
When he was angry or mad, he never, it was just...
He didn't. No, that's... And that way I'm surprised at that.
Yeah. He never used language like that when he was upset or angry or anything.
What?
Just in a jokingly way, I don't know.
strange, wasn't it?
When he's angry, he didn't use that.
Mm-mm.
He would just be very serious. Did he raise his voice when he was angry then?
Did he what?
Raise his voice when he was angry?
Well, I don't know either. He was loud enough, but he meant business, I don't know what to say there.
Do you, did either your parents ever tell you, or if they didn't tell you, do you think you would know what they consider the most important things in life? Did your parents ever tell you that what they considered the most important thing in life to them?
The only thing I can remember Mother saying, I'll sure be glad when the kids are all grown on their own. Now what she meant, whether that was a load, that I can remember. She always said, sure be glad when they're all on their own. Worry.
But Dad believed, Dad believed strongly in education.
Oh yeah,
He wanted us to all get educated if at all possible. Because he'd like to see Walter go on to school.
Yeah,
Walter didn't want to.
Did Richard or Adele, did either of them have any particular fears? It's not unusual for people to have different fears. I mean, some people have a great fear of snakes. He was talking about Kurt. Fear of the dark, or any sort of fears. Many people have fears. Did either of your parents have particular fears?
The only thing is that Ma always feared when Walter was gone and he didn't get back late at night that he would always have an accident. She always feared accidents.
That seems to be the universal mother's fear.
Oh, and she'd go to extremes. She'd walk down the road and look, in this ditch and that ditch.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. 4 or 5 miles she would walk.
Many times when I was small, I had to walk with her.
I did too.
Really?
I wouldn't let her go alone.
I mean, was your mother, would you, from instances like that, would you say your mother was overprotective of the kids?
Of Walter especially.
Mm-hmm.
That was her Teddy. She called him Teddy.
Mm-hmm.
Why was that?
Maybe it's because Johnny she couldn't depend on Johnny, and Willie was gone. All she had left was Walter. And of course, maybe we didn't count. I don't know.
Yeah, we always said that Walter was her pet. It was everything, and she called him Teddy. Teddy could do no wrong.
Do either of you have any particular fears?
I'm telling you, I'm afraid of a man. At night, I'm always afraid a man's going to come in the house. Man and snakes. Boy, I tell you, I'm scared to death. Don't you have any fears?
Storms.
Storms, well, you thunderstorms.
I don't know. They can all sleep and shut the window and forget about it. I can't. I really fear storms.
What were your parents' attitudes toward death?
I know Mother never feared death.
She was so patient.
Yeah. She was ready to go. And of course,
her mind was there too. It wasn't that she was.
And Dad, he went so fast, I don't think he had time to think.
That smile on his face,
when he died.
Sure told me something. We've never heard them discuss fear of death or anything. They don't.
My mother always told me a dream that she had when she was in the hospital, and I'll never forget that. Well, I come up there one day and she said to me, I had such a nice dream last night. And I said, what was that? And she said, it was a dream where my mother had little Willie in her hand and was walking across the garden. I'll never forget that. She always said that she had that dream. And boy, about 2 weeks after that, she was gone. First week she was in the Lutheran home.
We can play a little game here. I'm going to ask you some things, and I'm just curious. How do you think your father would have reacted to these situations? Okay. I'll see. I mean, for instance, if I don't know. How would your father react to being asked to do something by a child?
It would depend on what it would be.
Well, that's
because he loved children.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, he would play ball with the smallest of kids and go out. There could be company in the house and visiting, and he would go out and he'd play with the kids if they'd come in and ask him. Oh yes, he was a friend of children.
What if your father came across some sort of a disturbance? Let's say he was in town, in Butte here, and some sort of a fight broke out on the street there that is none of his business, and he was standing right there passing by. What do you think how your father would have reacted to that situation?
Well, if he...
I mean, knowing your father and his personality and how he was, would he have passed by, or would he have gone for help, or would he have interfered there and stepped in and tried to stop it, or how do you think he would have reacted?
I think, just how to put it, if he knew the party was in the right or the wrong, he would, I think he didn't interfere. He would have said, well, this fella's right, you know. He would have stood up for what is right, regardless.
Or what if he came across somebody beating their dog?
Oh, I don't think he'd have just stood by.
Don't you think so?
That wouldn't have been Dad.
Okay. How would your father have reacted to somebody playing a joke on him? Some sort of practical joke on him?
Oh, I think he was humorous enough to take it. You know, I think, don't you? He
Yeah.
never got mad.
No, he could take that, and he'd fire right back, and he'd fire a joke right back at him. No, he'd take that.
Okay. How would your father react if he were out on a piece of machinery and it broke down?
But hear a few words, maybe.
Blue streaks roll. Oh, he'd swear and cuss.
By force of habit.
Mm-hmm.
Not because he really meant it, I think just a habit.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, he'd swear until it was done, till it was fixed. I can just hear him.
He would get it going too, boy.
how would your father react to someone who was, not necessarily, it could be somebody he knew, I guess, who was very arrogant and loudmouthed? Would he be able to resist?
We could put him in his place if he could.
You think
He would.
you think he would go ahead and do that, or would he just
Pass
leave
on.
the room, or?
No,
No, he would tell him
what he thought.
if he knew he was right, you know.
That's right.
Okay.
You know, Dad was a man too that could fix anything. It didn't make a bit of difference what it was.
How about if, how would your father react if he had gone to, let's say he was relatively young at the time, I'm talking about when he was 75, but if he were a middle-aged person, he went to some sort of get-together, and he found himself sitting next to a very attractive woman.
I suppose he'd look at her once or twice. Reword that again.
How would he strike up conversation with her?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, he
He
would.
wouldn't be too slow on that, I'm sure. No, he was inquisitive. I don't know, put it that way.
Oh, yes, he would strike up a conversation.
I mean, do you think he would have enjoyed the company of an attractive woman?
Well, I think so. You know, he was a kind of a little stinker too. You know how what he used to say about Mrs. Zinter?
What did he used to say about Mrs. Zinter?
Oh, he used to put his arm on her shoulder, and look at her in her face, and he'd say some crazy business. I don't know. He was a stinker too.
How would he have reacted if you had banged up the car when you were, say, 18 years old? You had borrowed his car and ran into a tree or something.
Oh, I don't think I never was afraid to come home and tell him something like that. You know.
Would he have been understanding and said, well, accidents
so.
happen? Or would he have gotten a little angry and...
He maybe would have been disappointed, all right, but I don't think that I would have ever been afraid to tell him anything. I mean, that kind of a nature I think he had.
Okay. How did he react to taking those trips back to North Dakota with a car full of kids? Or back to Minnesota, rather.
Some of those I'll never forget. Well, I think that was, I don't know just what you want there, but when they were planning these trips, that was a highlight for them. I mean, look forward to that, you know.
You said you'll never forget some of those trips. What won't you forget of those trips?
One in special, and I was quite small, but I sure remember this one. We left, in an old Model T Ford, and it had a window in the back that was broken. They had those tops over the window was broken. And Dad had bought the boys each a cowboy hat, new one, Walton's one. And they were sitting in the back seat. We got to, well, in the first place, we got on the railroad track at Jamestown in the middle of the night. We had no lights. We were standing on the track. We must have missed the road someplace. I'll never forget that. And then he says, Mother got out, and he